On this video, I am going to be reading John chapter 2, along with a running commentary and application. We've already read John 1, now we're doing John 2. It's about the miracle at the wedding of Cana. On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. And both Jesus and his disciples were invited to the wedding. When the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what does that have to do with us? My hour has not yet come." I don't think he's being rude at this point. I think he's simply saying, my hour has not yet come, but yet he's going to do the miracle because it shows his, can I say, desire to be at the wedding and to celebrate. But at the same time, John's looking at the final day when his hour will come in his divine sacrifice. But we move on. His mother said to the servants, "Whatever he says to you, do it." Now there were 6 stone water pots set there for the Jewish custom of purification, containing 20 or 30 gallons each. That's a lot. Yeah, yeah. Jesus said to them, "Fill the water pots with water." So they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, Draw some out now, and take it to the head waiter." So they took it to him. When the head waiter tasted the water, which had become wine, and did not know where it came from, but the servants who had drawn the water knew, the head waiter called the bridegroom and said to him, "Every man serves the good wine first, and when the people have drunk freely, then he serves the poorer wine. But you have kept the good wine until now." This beginning of his signs Jesus did in Cana of Galilee and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. After this, he went down to Capernaum, he and his mother and his brothers and his disciples, and they stayed there a few days. Notice Jesus does his first miracle in John's gospel. And here we see him as the creator. We see him doing a miracle that only God could do. And as the God man, certainly John is setting this forth. Look at what he did. He is the creator. We've already said that all things we already saw in chapter 1 were made by him. Now we're seeing this carried out in this great miracle of changing water to wine and also having a wine that is the best tasting. So Jesus celebrates at a wedding and uses it as, we might say, one of the great signs of who he is as the creator, as the Son of Man, the God man, who is the creator of all things and can certainly then create new life, which will come right after this in the discussion of the new birth. So then we come to the first Passover. I believe Jesus attended 2 Passovers, and this is the first one. So it reads, "The Passover of the Jews was near, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem, and he found in the temple those who were selling oxen and sheep and doves, and the money changers seated at their tables. And he made a scourge of cords and drove them all out of the temple with the sheep and the oxen. And he poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. And to those who were selling the doves, he said, 'Take these things away. Stop making my Father's house a place of business. The disciples remembered that it was written, zeal for your house will consume me. So the Jews then said to him, the religious leaders, what sign do you show us as your authority for doing these things? Notice, first of all, Jesus' cleansing of the temple does not want to make religion a place of business. This is what they were doing. In my understanding, they were taking sheep and people would come in for sacrifice and they'd say, hey, we have this sheep we can give you, and here's what it will cost you. And so they were making a lot of money off of this. And Jesus is upset with this. And he goes on to say, don't make my house a house of business. And how we need that, I think, in the church even today. Sometimes we make the church a place of business rather than a house of worship. And this is what Jesus is condemning, I believe, or criticizing. So Jesus then answered them, destroy, what sign do you show us? He said, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. They're thinking of the temple that had taken 46 years to build. And so it goes on. The Jews, or the Jewish leaders, then said, it took 46 years to build this temple, and will you raise it up in 3 days? But he was speaking of the temple of his body. Jesus is talking about his resurrection. He's using an illustration, but applying it in his teaching to himself. And when he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he said this, and they believed the scripture and the word which Jesus had spoken. John is telling us that Jesus knew he would be crucified, and in 3 days he would raise his body. And he's speaking of his own body and what would happen. And of course, they didn't quite get it. They're thinking it's the physical temple that is being talked about. Now, when he was in Jerusalem at the Passover during the feast, many believed in his name, observing his signs which he was doing. But Jesus himself, on his part, was not entrusting himself to them, for he knew all men, and because he did not need anyone to testify concerning man, for he himself knew what was in man. Notice as John goes on here, there were those, many believed in his name, mainly because of the signs. But we're told Jesus, on his part, was not entrusting himself to them, for he knew all men, and because he did not need anyone to testify concerning man. So he wasn't after their applause, because he knew what was in man, for he himself knew what was in man. So basically, in chapter 2, we have two great movements. The miracle of Cana, showing that Jesus is truly the creator and fully divine to perform such a miracle. And number 2, that he doesn't want religion made simply for profit, for business, financial gain. Don't take my house of worship and turn it in to something that it should not be. And then finally, Jesus predicts about his own death and resurrection. Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. So Jesus knew in advance that he would be going to the cross, and that after 3 days he would raise himself from the dead, showing again that from the very get go, Jesus was aware of his mission and knew exactly what would be happening.